Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new video. Now an HD client for Oldschool Runescape is an idea that has existed for a long time now. I'm sure a lot of you guys remember OSHD, that had gained a ton of popularity until Jagex finally turned it down for a bunch of different reasons which we're not going to get into today. Now skip forward to 2020 and all of a sudden we have multiple HD clients that are all being worked on at once. We have OSRSRemastered, the Runelite HD plugin, and HDOS. Now today I thought it'd be interesting to have a discussion on HD clients, focusing not so much on whether we can get OSHD, because whether or not Jagex allows it is somewhat out of our control, but focusing rather on whether we should get an HD remake of Oldschool Runescape. There will obviously be a lot of positives to bumping up to HD, but there could also be a few notable issues and drawbacks to doing it. If you enjoy these types of videos, as always, I really appreciate it if you leave the video a like. Always helps out with the YouTube algorithm. Thank you so much, and let's get started. Now before I get started here, I just want to say that this is not meant to be a particular critique or an endorsement of any of these clients. I'm just using them to illustrate what HD clients look like, because what they look like is obviously very important in the context of this discussion. A ton of work has gone into all of these clients, so huge kudos to all of the developers. Now the three HD clients that have gained the most popularity in my opinion are OSRSRemastered, Runelite HD, and a somewhat newer one called HDOS. Now each of these are going for a slightly different approach and slightly different visuals. Now first up here we have OSRSRemastered, which is probably getting the biggest graphical upgrade of any of the clients. It's using an entirely different engine, and the game looks completely different. Sure, the item sprites and the inventory is the same, but the actual terrain is completely changed. Now next up here we have HDOS, which seems to be more closely resembling 2009-2010 graphical era. A lot of the textures are completely different, there are bloom effects in the game and other HD features, but the game is more or less recognizable as RuneScape. And finally here we have a HD plugin for Runelite, which is under development. As far as I'm aware, this one would not require you to download a separate client and would be available right in Runelite. Now Runelite HD would include HD features such as weather effects, bloom effects, a day-night cycle, and GPU renderer, whatever, but would mainly be focused on enhancing the existing assets rather than adding in anything new. Okay, so that was just kind of a quick general look at what types of HD clients are under development right now. Now moving forward, I'm going to have a look at what are the biggest benefits of bumping RuneScape into HD, and also what could be some of the biggest drawbacks of doing that. Now obviously one of the biggest benefits of an HD client is it has the potential to reach a much wider audience. There's no point denying that OSRS graphics look dated. I know, controversial, but it's the truth. Oldschool Runescape just looks very old, and that can be a turnoff for honestly the majority of new players. If Oldschool Runescape looked a lot more modern in HD, it would certainly appeal to a new and different audience. Getting Oldschool Runescape in HD also comes with a lot of performance improvements, for example, better frame rates, higher draw distances, GPU rendering, among other things. That said, we already do have some of those features just in Runelite, but undoubtedly there will be more performance improvements from having an HD client. Furthermore, having additional graphics options would probably satisfy a good portion of the existing player base, although the opposite could also be said as well. And finally here, one other big benefit is that if it was set up correctly, where you could either have a toggle option within the main client, or just having multiple third-party HD clients that you could use, is that you could satisfy a wide variety of players with completely different graphical tastes. This could all theoretically be done without ever impacting players who just wanted to play on the base client and base graphic settings. Now conversely here, I want to have a look at whether HD clients could actually have a negative impact on the game's health. Now to begin with here, Oldschool Runescape definitely has a certain feel to it, a vibe if you will. A good part of what makes Oldschool Runescape unique is actually the graphics. Obviously having really engaging gameplay and just being a game that was designed 20 years ago adds to it a lot, but the graphics are a huge part of it. It's almost to the point where it's pretty recognizable in my opinion, and pretty distinct from almost any other MMO on the market right now. I think if a lot of players switched over to using an HD client, the old school feel and the uniqueness could kind of fade away a bit. Now in my opinion, I don't think it's likely that the majority of players would use an HD client. mainly just because Runelite. I mean, everyone uses Runelite for all of the quality of life features, so I don't think it's super likely that a ton of players would move over to an HD client just because you lose out on so many features. But if a large enough player base moved over to using HD clients, part of what makes us stand out from any other MMO is going to kind of fade away. Now, the second major issue is I think it could really polarize the existing player base. Now, Oldschool Runescape is mainly made up of players who have played the game before. Obviously, there are new players, the game is growing, things are doing great, but one of the biggest bases of players is that core group who have stuck with it for decades now. So especially if Jagex implemented an HD toggle into the main client, I think it could alienate existing players. Now, the next issue here is more of a marketing one. I think a lot of these HD clients would make us look a lot more like RuneScape 3. That is an issue for a whole host of reasons. New players could easily get confused on why there are two games that look very similar and are both called RuneScape. One of the bigger draws for RuneScape 3 is that it has modern graphics. So from a purely business standpoint, I think that could also be a bit of an issue. And finally here, from my perspective, content creation would be kind of challenging as well. If there were a ton of content creators all using different varieties of HD clients for making videos, I think that also could be very polarizing and a bit confusing. So now the most important question of all, should we have HD clients for Oldschool RuneScape? Now I want to preface this by saying that I don't really see an issue with having the option of having HD graphics. I'm of the opinion that I don't think it's something that Jagex should focus on or put into their base client, even as a toggle. But if a creative individual from the community can make an HD client that Jagex approves on from a technical level, like there's no issues with anti-cheating or botting, conforms to all specifications, I think it definitely should be allowed. I think a community-driven project is perfect for something like this, and I don't think Jagex should or could dump enough resources in to making an HD client that would appeal to everybody. Personally, I don't think I would play on an HD client that changed things too much. Sure, I would try it out just for fun, maybe make a video on it, but I don't think I would actively play on it. In my opinion, I think to get the best of both worlds is just to continually improve Runelite or maybe even the base client. Right now we have GPU rendering, anti-aliasing, a few texture fixes, but maybe push that even further. I think adding in day-night cycles, weather effects, stuff like that really could help enhance the game. Maybe adding in a bit of extra lighting, a little extra shading, but very subtle. Because in the end, I really do feel like the old school RuneScape graphics definitely have charm to it. Now I think a really good comparison is to a game like Wind Waker. The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker came out pretty much around the exact same time that RuneScape did, and actually RuneScape Classic. Even though Wind Waker was released nearly 20 years ago now, I think it's one of my favorite looking Zelda games. If you compare that to a game like Skyrim that came out nearly 10 years later, I actually think that Skyrim, not including any mods or anything, looks worse. So I really do think that trying to make old school RuneScape look like a modern MMO, more realistic, is just kind of a bad idea. OSRS is never going to look as good as a modern MMO, so I definitely think we should keep it in a state that separates it from other games. A few years ago they released Wind Waker in HD, and I think that is exactly what we should try to do. The game definitely looks way better, but not really that different, and I think that's a perfect compromise. So I know that this could be a bit of an unpopular opinion, but in the end I think it's definitely good to take a moment to really think about how this could impact the game, good or bad. In the end though, I don't think it's going to be the end of RuneScape, whatever happens. I just think it's good to take a minute to think about it. Anyway guys, that is going to be it for today's video. I'm pretty curious to know what you guys think about it. I know that it can be very divisive. Some people are very against HD clients. Some people are very positive about them. So let me know what you guys think with a comment down below. I always appreciate it. I'm very curious to know what the community as a whole thinks about it. Now before I go here, I want to give a massive thank you to one of my newest subscribers, James Luft, who just subscribed at the Dragon tier of YouTube membership, joining Brad Sings, Tizdoc Bunny, Revolver Ocelot, and Kush Patel, all at the Dragon tier. That's amazing, guys. Thank you so much. And also a huge shout out to Luke Kaiser, Base Titch, Heathen, OSRS, and Double Talk for your continued support. If you guys are looking for an additional way to support the channel, becoming a YouTube member is an awesome way to do so. You can become immortalized in some of my videos, get access to my video release schedule, as well as get a custom role in my Discord channel. Thanks again guys, and I'll see you next time.